I am very, very excited about what you are about to see, because for the first time, we are pulling back the curtain. You are going to see coaching live, unscripted, uncensored. You will see what it's like to coach, and you will see Scott as the client. So I will let them introduce themselves, but the process of coaching is really what we call client-centered, and you will see that emphasized. It is not about telling somebody what to do. And before we begin, I just want to make one point, and I've been talking about this on Instagram several times, and that is, you may have seen all these AI health coaches. I saw another news article just this morning. And if anyone is fearing, like, are we going to be replaced by non-humans? And absolutely not, because what you will see today is coaching that is effective. It is not advice giving. And all of these apps that are in development are about giving recommendations, taking your health data and then recommending, telling you what to do. That is not coaching. Doesn't say it won't have a place, but it is not health coaching. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Scott and Holly so that we can get started.
Awesome. Well, I'll introduce myself first before kicking it over to Holly. My name is Scott Hawksworth. I'm the Director of Marketing and Sales here at FMCA. And as you'll see, I'm a busy father of three. And, I've been with FMCA just past a year now, and it has been such an amazing journey for me. But, one of those things, when I even first came across FMCA, I just didn't really know what health coaching was. And over this past year, I've learned, and I've been so excited to kind of take a seat in the client role and really learn firsthand all about coaching. So I'm super excited to go on this journey.
All right, well, welcome everybody. So my name is Holly Ladd, and I am a course facilitator here at FMCA, and I've been with FMCA since the very beginning. So I have been part of the organization since 2015, first as a student and then as a course facilitator. And I love coaching. I love demonstrating coaching. I love coaching people. And I'm really excited this opportunity to have this very live, authentic coaching interaction with Scott today. So I thought we would give you guys just a little bit of an intro. So here we are. We're having an Experiencing Health Coaching Live between myself and Scott, who is a very great client. And one thing Scott and I did, because we really wanted to make this a very authentic experience, was to have a foundation session, just the two of us, for about an hour, to really get to know who Scott is, get to know his aspirations, what his strengths are. And it's what we would do with a regular client. We would always start out with a foundation session. And what it does is lays the foundation for successful coaching. It's really hard to set goals in a vacuum, and it's really important that our clients understand their lives and have a chance to kind of dig in and look at their strengths, at their challenges, at their successes, and what drives them and their passions and values. And that's what we did about a couple weeks ago. So I found out that Scott's married. He has two daughters, a son, works as a marketing director for FMCA, lives in the Chicago area. His why, and this is what's so important in our foundation session, is to really dig deep and really understand what our clients want their health for. And for Scott, it was abundantly clear that it was his family. He wants to be around for his family, vibrant, vital, playing with his kids, grandkids, just really not having to put any burdens on them because of his health. He's coming to coaching because he has a strong family history of cardiovascular disease or stroke. Currently, he has elevated blood pressure and cholesterol, and he wants to make some changes to his diet and exercise to support his health. We talked about his health vision, and he said a life without a serious health event, and to live with mobility, flexibility, energy, and to age actively and youthfully. And one story he shared, one vision he shared was after his kids are out of the house, maybe he and his wife getting a really active dog and like running with the dog or biking with the dog and be able to keep up, which is a beautiful, beautiful vision. His strengths, he has many strengths. He's very creative. He has incredible perspective, a love of learning, perseverance, and problem solving became abundantly clear in our conversation. And his main challenge right now is just time, as many of us experience. He has a busy life with 5-month-old twins and a 4-year-old, and there are 2 full-time working parents. So probably many of us can relate to that structure. And in terms of accountability, like how he keeps on track and accomplishes goals, he does well with structure and also to take things slowly. So we're keeping that into consideration as we work with him through these changes. And as a result of our conversation, we determined that for the next couple of weeks, he would do a food journal, just recording the foods that he ate, because one thing he said in the session was, you can't solve a problem unless you know what the problem is. And so he likes collecting data. So this food journal was a way for him to collect some data on his own eating and maybe see where some issues lie and think about what he can do differently. And then another concept we thought about was the concept of exercise, not as like a full 30-minute exercise session at once, because that doesn't really fit into his life at the moment, but this concept of exercise snacks, which are just little bits of movement and exercise throughout the day. So we're just going to have him think about some options that might come to mind for exercise snacks. So we had a great conversation. And one thing I want to share with you is just a visual of Scott's why. And it's so clear. Look at those cute kids. They're adorable. His wife, you can see that Scott has a lot to be healthy for. So with that introduction, Scott, are we ready to dive in and do some coaching?
Let's dive in. I'm ready.
So you guys know, this would be what we would consider a follow-up session. So follow-up sessions are generally about 30 to 45 minutes. We're going to do a 30-minute session today. And so we'll get started. All right. So, hey, Scott, it's good to see you again.
Hey, Holly, great to see you.
Cool. So what's a highlight? It's been a couple of weeks since we last spoke. What's something that you've really really appreciated over the past couple of weeks?
I'm sorry, say that again.
In your life. Something that you really appreciated over the past couple of weeks in your life.
Yeah, I really appreciated, again, kind of keeping with that theme of family. My sister came into town with her boys, and over this past, actually, I took a couple days off work this week, and we got to spend time. We went to the beach. We went to a couple museums here in Chicago, the aquarium, and they were really, really busy days, filled with a lot of activity and a lot of good chaos, as you get with big families. And I was just really appreciating it. And again, I guess tying it into, why I'm trying to do this is enjoying that I could meet that activity and run around with my nephews and wrestle in the lake and all these kinds of things. I was pretty tired at the end of the day, but I could do it.
Yeah, for sure. And I love how you're making the connection already between that experience and future experiences that you want to have for years and years down the road. So again, incredible perspective that you bring to this, to your life. Well, I want to start by just reflecting back on, your food log. And I just want to check in with you and see, how was that experience for you?
It was an interesting experience. It was one of those things where you don't think about what you're eating. Like I know what I eat, and I try to eat healthy and all the things, but you don't really think about it until I was doing this food log, and I'd, have a yogurt and I'd be like, oh, I got to log that. That's a, and I'll be honest, I don't think I logged everything because, sometimes I'll snack, I'll grab something here or there, but it even made me think about that. And there's a few times where I was like, oh, I should probably log this. I'm like, but it's late and it's just an Oreo,
For sure. So again, that just have a little bit more awareness and of what you're eating, and what learnings did you get from seeing kind of visually your food intake over those few days?
It's funny. I I found myself trying to like defend myself. Like, well,
Mm.
there's some vegetables there, but then I was like, oh gosh, that I think there's a lot of dairy here. Oh, is there too much sugar? It just kind of made me, as I was looking at it all laid out, I almost started scrutinizing it in a way and thinking like, well, is there things I could do better? But then also feeling this sort of defensiveness of, man, I'm really busy. Hey, I did a good job. We cooked dinner. We didn't order out.
Yeah.
I think that piece.
Right. So there were some definite wins that you saw, like, hey, we cooked dinner at home. We didn't get fast food. We didn't go out. And then there were also some things where you're like, maybe I could do this a little bit better. Maybe there's a different choice or something that I could do differently. And maybe just beginning to wonder about how things might change. And I remember in our initial conversation that you're like, you don't want a complete overhaul of your diet. That's just extreme for you at the moment. And you're willing to maybe make some swaps, maybe work on a few things that would be approachable and easy for you.
Well, that's exactly because, my doctor has told me, Mediterranean diet, that's what you need. And so I think that was another piece I was looking at was like, is this exactly Mediterranean? I don't think there was any fish, that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a little maybe uncertainty as to what exactly a Mediterranean diet is for you.
Yeah,
Okay.
100%. I mean, I know like vague, like, oh, it's fish. It's not heavy stuff. There you go. That's the
Yeah,
extent.
yeah. So it's a little more nuanced than fish and not heavy stuff. And we can get into that. But let's put the food on the side. So you had a good experience. Sounds like it was a good experience doing the food log. You
Yeah,
just
I
kind
would
of,
say it was, and I'm a data person as we
huh?
discussed. That's how I ended up in marketing. And it's just nice. It's comforting to me to see things laid out because then I just think about it like I think about anything in my life. Okay, now where are the opportunities?
Right. And so given that, and also just the perseverance that it took to do the log, because I know you're a busy person and it was just one more to do during all those 2 days. So you did it, which also shows your determination in making a change. Thinking about those opportunities, was there any one thing that you were like, this seems like something that I might want to address?
Maybe well, there were two things. One, and I think in my food log, you'll remember I like skipped lunch one of the
Uh-huh.
days.
Uh-huh.
Um, And that I won't lie, that's not super infrequent. Like sometimes I just get working, I'm doing things, and I'll just skip lunch. And
Yeah.
then I just realized, especially on that day, what then ends up happening, or if I have a really light lunch, I get super hungry at like 4.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm now in the thick of it. I don't have time to eat. And so then I just like go into the kitchen and I'm just grabbing like snack this, snack that, basically
Yeah.
to quiet the hunger. And then I've now eaten more. There was no real meal to it. And then, then of course I have dinner, but like I was just, I recognized, I guess, that when I skip lunch, I still need the calories because I get hungry. And I'm one of those people that gets
Right.
grouchy, get too hungry. So like, I don't know. It's like, well, I almost get it in a worse way if I'm not intentional with my meal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, that's a powerful insight is that, hangry Scott goes into the kitchen and just starts mindlessly eating whatever's available and not putting much thought into it. It's just feed the monster, feed the hunger. And that maybe causes you to eat things that maybe you wouldn't necessarily want.
100%, because I'm thinking fast, quiet the hunger so I can move on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's put food aside for a sec. And I want to check in on the exercise snacking. Was that anything? Did you give any thought to that concept?
Yeah, I did give thought to it. I didn't like try any of it, but I
Yeah.
saw where pieces where that can work. I have I don't know what they call it, like natural kinetic energy. Like I stand up like during the day if I'm
Mhm.
excited or I'm really thinking about a problem. I love standing up and taking a lap around the office or whatever. And I thought about how maybe a more intentional, like, okay, it's now I'm going to go stand up and I could maybe do a shorter exercise. Because as we discussed, I've got this elliptical here that I haven't gotten on, and it's kind of like it's like a thing of guilt for me because I used to get on it and now I don't. And so I was
Yeah.
just thinking like, well, how could I work that in? And then I was also thinking as I like carry two babies upstairs and things
Yeah,
like that. We have a
for
third
sure.
floor walk up. That's where we live. I'm like, is this an exercise snack? I kind of hope it is.
I would say yes, absolutely. You're carrying weight, you're going upstairs. It's definitely counts. And so another thing that you're sharing is that you really aren't a super sedentary guy. It's not like you're just sitting all day long. You do move. And to really recognize and value the fact that you are doing some movement throughout the day already, even though it's not organized, kind of structured movement,
Mhm.
you're moving, right?
Yeah. It's so funny because it's like I'm living in it, but it's like hard to quantify. Like, oh, is
Yeah,
that good? Because again, it's like this weird shame spiral. I think that we've all gotten, or not all of us, but I've gotten this messaging like, well, that doesn't count. Exercise doesn't count unless you go to the gym, you change your
right,
shirt, you get your good sweat on.
right.
And so I was trying to challenge that with myself, but I'll be honest, there's still this like, well, is that really exercise? You walked around the office, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. So some prejudices, some biases that are in there that are kind of clouding your judgment a bit about what counts as exercise. And maybe we can shift that, or maybe we can move towards something that more feels like exercise. But so in our time today, we have about 20 minutes left. What do you want to accomplish? Like we've gone through the food log. I know you want to make some adjustments to the diet. We're talking a little bit about movement. Where do you want to focus the rest of our attention today?
I'm such a structure person, and I love
Mhm.
goal setting. So I think it would be cool if it was like, here's a thing I can work on till our next session. Like, can I almost like, now can we put it into practice? Can I incorporate a change into my daily routine or
Mhm.
my life? Because
Yeah.
with three kids, yeah, routine's kind of a a fuzzy word, but is there something I can do? Like if we're talking about exercise snacks, again, I would feel like very excited if I could have something like a goal and like, okay, do this
Yeah.
exercise snack over the next X number of time, and
And
then take one change of food or something.
okay, so you kind of want to address maybe both and have a small action step that you can take over the next week in both areas that will make you feel like you're making progress towards your ultimate goal of, lowering your blood pressure and being healthier.
Yeah, because I've just found when I try to do too much and try like make wholesale changes, I'll go to the store, I'll go get all the things and I'll do that, but it won't stick.
Mhm.
I'll fall back into old habits. So I
Yeah,
think that's where I'm like incremental.
right, absolutely. And then, you said you get into this shame spiral, and then that can be very embarrassing to have all these grandiose intentions and not follow through. It just is a little bit defeating. So
Right.
let's set you up for success.
I'm down.
Which do you want to tackle first? The exercise snack or the food piece?
Can we talk food? I just feel like there was so
Abs-
much around food for me that was like,
Yeah, great. So in thinking of food, you mentioned the Mediterranean diet and not really having a whole lot of knowledge around what that is.
yeah.
And not that you're going to go from how you're eating today to the Mediterranean diet in a week, but would it be helpful? Would you be interested in? There's a food plan, which is basically the Mediterranean food plan, that has been created by the nutritionists at the Institute for Functional Medicine. It's called the Cardiometabolic Food Plan, and it lays out basically all the foods that support cardiovascular health, that support lowering your blood pressure, dealing with cholesterol, preventing atherosclerosis and inflammation. And I would be happy to share that with you just in terms of like a list of foods at this point, not even the whole plan.
That sounds amazing, because that's part of the thing is like, I know what we eat, but like having at least, okay, this is within that realm of the Mediterranean diet versus this isn't, because the way it is, especially when we go to the store, I go shopping with my daughter Charlotte. She's my helper, and it's so fun. But then when we get there, when we go to Aldi or whatever, it's like, okay, well, I know what I normally get, so I just get what I normally get. Whereas having some knowledge would be very helpful. Is like,
Yeah.
okay, maybe go
Yeah.
to this one.
Right. And so can I share just a couple big picture concepts, not go into the weeds so much?
Sure.
So big picture is the Mediterranean diet focuses on, as you can imagine, a lot of vegetables. So the non-starchy vegetables, so leafy greens, broccoli, cauliflower, peppers, anything that's not starchy. You can have some potatoes, you can have some stuff like that, but squash, that would be considered a
So
starchy
would sweet
vegetable.
potatoes count?
Sweet potatoes are a starchy vegetable. They are allowed, but you want to make sure that you're not overdoing the starchy vegetables.
Okay.
So you can have as many like celery, carrots, beets, turnips, lettuce, arugula, spinach, broccoli.
Okay.
You can eat as much of that as you want. The starchy stuff we want to kind of limit a bit. In addition, healthy sources of protein. So fish, chicken, very limited, but a little bit of red meat, if that's something that you like. We're not going to eliminate all of that. Beans are wonderful sources, beans, legumes. I noticed you had rice and black beans in one of your meals with tacos. So beans are great. Nuts and seeds. So almonds, walnuts, hazelnuts, pistachios, cashews are seeds like chia seeds and flax seeds. These all support good cardiovascular health. And then berries are super powerful. Blueberries are super powerful for them. So those are kind of just some big pictures. And then grains, you want to be looking more at whole grains like whole oats, steel cut oats, barley. You don't want the refined grains like pastas and bread. You can have them, but you want to limit it, right? So again, we're not going to do this overnight.
Right.
Just so you get a sense of where you might be heading over the next few years, because this could take a while.
Yeah.
And then lastly, what's really important is limiting sugar and processed foods. And I know you've talked about sugar a bit, and really sugar is plays a big role in elevated blood pressure and cholesterol. And I know those are two areas that you are working with. So those are kind of big principles. And in looking at maybe a one action step, given those sort of overarching big principles that you might want to focus on for this week, what's an area that you might want to focus on?
I'm like looking through, I was just kind of listing out the all the different like the veggies that are good. We do lots of broccoli, which is good. And then wanting to limit the starchy stuff. We have a couple meals we do where we do sweet potatoes. So I'm kind of like thinking like, oh, could we just lean on broccoli for that? Or something to that effect. Yeah, I think those pieces were kind of standing out, like, okay, maybe little substitutions. And I just it's kind of a question came up, just, the one thing my doctor said was talked about salt. And so one of the things with nuts is I'm like, okay, I know those are salty. I know when I make broccoli, like we put the salt and the garlic on it. We've got like this little, pre-made Weber vegetable, seasoning mix that we put on. And I'm wondering like, oh, is that a piece of this as well? Like I can make the broccoli, healthier by trying to reduce the salt, or some nuts are good or not others because some are just really salted. I guess I'm just curious about that.
Absolutely. So great question. And yes, sodium is one thing we want to pay attention to as well, limiting it to around a teaspoon a day eventually. Again,
Mhm.
not something we're going to ask you to do overnight. And nuts, when it comes to nuts, you really want to buy like a non-roasted, non-salted nut. So more of a raw nut. So it's going to take maybe a minute or two to adjust to the nut without the salt,
Yeah.
you know. And sometimes it helps to just roast them in the oven at home, just get a little flavor, or on a saute pan, and just bring out a little bit of the sweetness, inherent sweetness of a nut. It helps with the flavor a bit than just eating a raw nut. But then you're avoiding salt and oils that may be not so good for your health, and it's just a better option for you.
Good. Well, and that's the thing, is like through all of this, I'm not going to be able to change my life and not have those days where I like didn't eat as much, or I get hungry and I'm on the move and I just need to snack. Like I need to get some burst of food energy. And so I'm just, as we're going through this, I'm like, well, maybe, okay, substitute, but like having raw nuts or available, or something that I roasted that's just right here on my desk at work, where I can go, oh man, boom, boom, have some.
What does that sound like to you? I mean, it's
That sounds good, and especially if I'm trying to do it in such a way that I'm like limiting the saltedness and like getting like, okay, I like nuts. Can I do it in a way that I have that? So if I do happen to have that crazy day where I don't eat a full lunch or whatever, maybe I'll be like more okay energy wise, and not quite so let me cram everything in at 4 p.m.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that the list of foods that you'll get with this cardiometabolic food plan will give you some other ideas of what you could just have on quickly on hand to grab when you're hungry, you know?
Can I show you, like, for
Yeah.
example, like I have this right here, this granola. I don't know if you can see, it says apple
I
and
do.
almond gluten-free honey granola. And so like I use this to like put it in my yogurt. But then what happens is, when I would eat the yogurt,
Yeah.
and then I'll be here and I'll just start like just kind of shuffling some granola in. But
So
maybe
if you
substitute that,
bring
or
out that if you bring out that bag of yogurt, I mean, excuse me, granola,
yeah.
and can you tell me how much sugar is in there
7 grams.
per serving?
Yeah, includes 6 grams of added sugars.
Okay.
Says.
So one thing to be careful of with granola is that the sugars in granola can add up very quickly. And so maybe it's nuts instead of granola, right? It would be, and you can put nuts in your yogurt. It's delicious.
Right. Right. So I'm like, that's why I'm like, oh, it's so good to eat by itself because it's sugary.
Yeah, of course it's delicious. Who doesn't love it? So yeah, thinking about those things, maybe, another thing I noticed is that, I know you love your Oreos, and there were a lot of Oreos. It was almost a nightly thing. What about thinking about just making that, well, is that something you'd be willing to sort of swap out or deal with at the moment, or do you want to keep that consistent?
I really like my Oreos. I like at night before bed having like a little burst of sweetness, I guess.
Mhm.
And the thing with the Oreos is like, I limit it. I'm like, I will have no more than 3
Mhm.
and my glass of milk. But I am open, like, can I get that sweet in a delicious snack that's not Oreo? If there were that, even if it was like, because that's the other thing, I'll be honest, my life is so hectic right now.
Yeah,
Like my wife and I were like, we want to preserve our joys. and,
of course.
and Oreo is a joy. So I'm like, well, but is there a way where I could get some sweetness, not necessarily having an Oreo every night? Because it's like every night I'll have some
Yeah.
Oreos or something like that, or I'll have some pieces of chocolate or something, because it's just kind of it's my nightcap.
So pieces of chocolate, you said. So
Yeah.
dark chocolate is actually a good food in the Mediterranean
I
diet.
love dark chocolate.
Bingo.
Okay. Okay. I'm gonna write this down. Dark chocolate. Is there like a percentage? Because like I'll go like, give me 79%, 78%. Like,
Perfect. Yeah, go for it. 79, 80%, 85%. I mean, the more cocoa you can get in your chocolate, the less sugar. So yeah, go for it.
Okay.
It's a superfood for
I was
blood
that I
pressure.
was that weird kid that when we would do Halloween and you always trade with your friends and everything. I was like, give me all the special dark. I'll take it. And they're like, this is yucky. I'm like, give it to me.
Right. Okay. So summarize for me how you foresee a couple, the limited action step that you're going to take for the next week around food that we've talked about and how you see it playing out over the week.
So I think I'm gonna start with the last one, dark chocolate. I'm like, ooh, okay. I can go to Walgreens over here, grab a Ghirardelli dark chocolate and be like, Scott, this is your snack to like maybe reduce the number of Oreos I'm having. So I think that's one. I think, and then tackling the nut piece, I feel like I need like a little more research to like figure out what kind of nuts,
Okay.
but I think I think having nuts on hand that are not super salty or baked or whatever, I could see that as just like a good step.
Okay. So when are you going to go to Walgreens and grab your dark chocolate? When do you have time to get that?
So I'm picking my daughter up today, and we normally do a little grocery run or something. So I'm just thinking like right off the bat, hey, can we swing by? And as part of we're grabbing a few things here and there, I get some dark chocolate and then at least look at the nut aisle and see what they have.
Yeah. So in the nut aisle, if there's anything that's just raw or non-roasted, unsalted, go for it. And, everybody has different nuts they like, but walnuts, almonds, cashews, any of those would be great.
I like almonds too, so
Yeah.
cool.
You can mix them
Okay.
up too. You can have a mixture. It doesn't have to be one.
A medley,
So.
as they say.
A medley, yes. Nut medley. All right. So, and I would say, how do you see this action step sort of tying into the bigger goal of, reducing blood pressure and eating healthier at the end of 3 months?
Well, I think when I incorporate this and find something I like that what works with my routine, I'm pretty simple. Like, and with food, like when I was a kid, I would have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich for lunch every single day. Like I actually don't mind eating the same darn thing. So I can see like once I find my thing, I'm like, great,
Yep.
I can keep eating it. And then I think too, there's like this almost like guilt-free aspect. Like you telling me like dark chocolates, like that's not bad. If you're reducing the sugar there, then I can just see me then not feeling any of the shame, like, oh, I had so much sugar or whatever. I'm like, I had a piece of dark chocolate. I'm okay. And I think for me, that's just helpful. It just like makes me feel good. And then I'm not shame spiraling or whatever.
Yeah. And so let's think about the dark chocolate. It's not the whole bar, right? It's
Right.
square, right?
Yeah, right. Like, so have a piece, don't eat through the whole bar.
Exactly.
Same.
Right.
So it's like I have principles, right? Like
Yeah.
I only have 3 Oreos. So
Totally. You've got
have a nice
self-regulation.
block. Don't go all
Yeah.
really
No,
walk on
I
it.
can see it. Yeah. You have the strengths of like routine and structure. And for you, it's just finding that routine and finding the structure and finding what to install where in your life. And once it's there and installed, you got it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to follow through with these 2 changes this week? 1 being forget about it and 10 being, yeah, I'm all in.
I would say like 9. Like the dark chocolate thing is happening. The nuts, there's maybe like a little extra barrier there. Like I got to figure out the nuts thing because if the thing with like roasting them, if it's like it's so silly, but it's like even if it's throw it in the oven for 10 minutes, but I'm like, I need to watch it and I need to do that, and then I could see myself being like, man, I gotta change these diapers. I don't have time for the nuts thing.
Yeah. Well, the roasting is not a necessary step. You
Right,
don't
right, right.
have to
but to make them,
Right.
but to make them more appealing or whatever.
Yes. And then, so a 9, why would you say it's a 9 and not a 7?
Because I can just see where this fits into my routine. It doesn't feel too daunting to just grab a bar of dark chocolate and be like, this is your snack for the evening. That doesn't feel too daunting. I'm like, I can do that. And I'm literally like, yep, I'm gonna take my daughter. We're gonna go and I'm looking for some dark chocolate.
Right.
So that's why.
Okay. Yeah. And so the only issue is kind of roasting the nuts. Are there any other challenges that you see maybe that might impede your success this week?
Well, we're going on vacation next week. So I
Okay.
think that's going to be, vacations are always tough. And we go to South Haven every year, South Haven, Michigan, for those of you who may be familiar, but there's Sherman's ice cream. There's lots of snacking. There's,
Mhm.
and then like when we go to the store in South Haven and like we collect our groceries for the week, it's a lot of like, get treats for yourself, live it up. So I do think that could be a challenge. But again, I think that's where like the dark chocolate, I'll be like, get some dark chocolate. Maybe there's some local Michigan dark chocolate you can get.
There you go. Yeah. So maybe just looking for a, vacation dark chocolate that's special,
Yeah.
um, that you may intertwine. And, hey, that's sort of a big challenge. And we're just diving into this with a very new habit. So what would be a win for you in terms of snacking over vacation? Just one small little micro victory, because enjoy yourself.
Yeah. I think if I could find some dark chocolate and like not get the sleeve of Oreos and go to town and, I'll still look, we're going to go get some Sherman's ice cream. It's going to happen. It's a joy
Yeah.
thing for everybody. But if I juxtapose that with like, hey, okay, I'm not going every night. I'm not pounding Oreos. Then I think that will feel like a win if I'm still being intentional.
Yeah. Oh,
Wow. In that
intentional.
environment.
Still being intentional. That's a big word. Still being intentional. Well, we actually are out of time, if you can believe it. We've worked our
Oh,
way
cool.
through 30 minutes. And just to wrap up, I'm going to send you the cardiometabolic food plan, so you'll have that. It's just something to start exploring. But what's an insight that you're walking away with today from our session?
I'm seeing that like the little changes feel very doable, but then if like kind of like with the roasting the nuts thing, like my brain seemed to go right to that and then be like,
Yep.
oh no, oh I can't do it.
Mhm.
So I think that's like the keep when I can see the path to how I can work it in and it
Mhm.
doesn't feel like too overwhelming, then I feel like excitement about it. But if it
Mhm.
feels like, oh man, I think even as I look at this, food plan, I think I'm gonna really try to like have to temper my I don't know, expectations or
Sure.
like or because I'm such a I want to go all in,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
sometimes it's like that's not what this is about because it can work. Like I can go all in on some things and it works out great, but then sometimes I'll just like go all in and then I won't stick to anything.
Yeah.
And after so many revolutions around the sun, I've kind of realized, oh, I really the little changes that build,
Right.
that's what
Yeah.
gets
So
me forward.
yeah, I mean, it's great perspective to understand that you're going to need to kind of tamper your excitement about this food plan and just kind of gradually weave it in a slow, and you said that last time, it's got to be sustainable and methodical. So, experiment with the chocolate and the nuts this week, next week, vacation, whatever it happens, whatever happens, happens. When we meet again, we can just see how things went.
Yeah.
Maybe figure out if you found a way to roast the nuts, great. And if not, we can figure that out and move on and just keep weaving in little bits of this food plan so that, maybe 6 months to a year from now, you've kind of got a good part of it mastered.
Yeah. And that's exciting to me too. Just like that being able to look back and be like, oh my gosh, I picked up, just anecdotal. I'm a musician. I wanted to learn guitar when I was 30.
Mm-hmm.
So I just got a guitar lessons, and I just plugged away and plugged away. Happy to say I can play all the campfire songs these days.
Excellent.
And that felt so accomplishing, like such an accomplishment to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's exciting to think about how I can build the pieces. And then when you say like 6 months, like, wow, if I look back and I look and I'm like, yep, look at that Mediterranean diet. Boom, look at all this.
Wow, that's a great metaphor that you just came up with for yourself, looking at how you like hunkered down, did the drills. I know what it's like to learn an instrument, and you had to go through a progression of steps to get to the point where you could play
And
this song.
plateaus. Guitar has
Yes.
big plateaus. You get a lot of gains, and then you're like, I can't do this chord. And then that you have to push through it. It's a rewarding instrument in that way.
All right. Well, keep that in mind too as we go through that process. So thank you for your time today. And you seem to be excited to dive in and just start with a couple of small steps that seem manageable. And I'll really look forward to hearing how things go next time we
I'm
meet.
looking forward to it.
All right. Thanks, Scott.
Sandy, I don't know if you had some closing thoughts or anything you wanted to just kind of share some perspective.
Yes, I want to say that this was not fake. This is what actually happens. This was not scripted. They had not planned this in advance.
Yep,
They
got
did
my
not
notes.
know where the conversation was going to go. And Scott was in control. Holly was not taking the lead. And I also want to emphasize the part that you don't see, and that is that when the session finishes, Holly's going to have notes, and she's going to describe in her notes that she was educating Scott on this food plan that was developed by Institute for Functional Medicine nutritionists. So she is not the one who's developing the plan for Scott. She is not the one who is ordering it, recommending it. Scott chose this. And what she's doing is educating him about how to do it. And they're also focused a lot on obstacles because change doesn't happen in isolation. He talks a lot about his family, about upcoming vacation, issues that are going on that might be stumbling blocks. And the more a coach can help people to see that and actually rehearse for it in advance, they're more likely to be successful. So let's open it up for questions.
Oh, this is a good one. What do you do when the client repeatedly does not follow through on their self-chosen tasks? I think that's
Good
a cool
question.
question.
Yeah,
So if I
well,
just said, you know what, I'm not doing this. We come back to our session. I didn't eat the dark chocolate. In fact, I ate more Oreos.
right. So yeah, I mean, those are learning opportunities with our clients as we look at, so what was going on, what were the circumstances? Perhaps sometimes, at least in my experience as a coach, the client may think they want to start with food, and then they realize that they can't make sustainable food changes because they're not sleeping enough. And then we might shift from food to getting better sleep so that they're better rested to be able to make better food choices throughout the day. Or it may be something around stress. It may be just, I call it the wrong domino that we choose a domino that isn't going to cascade and create a bunch of different changes. It's one that's really challenging. So sometimes it's just picking the right domino. Sometimes it may be we picked something that wasn't attainable. It was too big. And that's why I appreciate working with Scott, is he really was like, I want something small. I want something that I can be successful at, knowing my limitations. And so we worked with that parameter. So really making sure that the scope of the goal isn't too large for somebody to be successful with. And then sometimes it's just the goal isn't really connected to a deep value or motivation within the person. And so they're not really inspired to do it. It's sort of like, I don't really want to do that. It doesn't hit me. And so sometimes we have to like connect it back to their vision and who they want to be, and really kind of seeing the downstream effects or upstream effects, as you will, of making this one change. So it's a moment for exploration. and allowing the client to feel like not judged for failure, but what did we learn? What did you learn in that experience? And that's up to the coach to kind of bring it out. So great question. And it's why we exist as coaches, because it happens.
I want to say to that, like Holly, the Oreos thing, like you heard me saying, because it's true. That is my joy, that little sweetness at the end of the day. I have long, sometimes hard days. And so I felt the resistance within me to be like, no, don't make me give up my little snack at night. But then we found this, now I'm excited. I'm like, oh, I can go into the world of dark chocolate, and not feel tremendous guilt about it, and still get that joy.
I would also like to add that sometimes when clients think they're not being successful, that they're failing, and often as a coach, you want to speed up the timetable because you want to see your clients succeed. And if you step back, and if you have the client step back and really dissect what happened, they might find that they are making progress. It's just subtle and it's not very apparent, but maybe they're spending more time thinking about it in contemplation, but they're moving farther into action than they were the previous week. So it might be a tiny little step. And so you acknowledge that change happens, but it often can happen slowly, but it's still change nevertheless.
100%.
Yeah, thanks,
There's a
Sandra.
question
That's
here.
great.
How often is the coach meeting with the client?
It depends on the client. I generally start out for a new client wanting to work with them at least once a week, at least for a good time frame, so that I found that if there's too much time between coaching sessions, they can fall back, and that it impedes momentum and progress. So I like to work with them weekly for the first month or two, see how it goes, and then we may just mutually decide that every other week is a better time frame, or they may want to stay with once a week. So it's sort of client dependent, but I do feel personally that when you're first starting out with the client, more frequently, like once a week, is more effective to support behavior change.
Saw someone say, I thought the coach should be in control.
But
that's not
so
it, right?
Well, the coach is subtly in control in the sense that we want to guide the client through a productive conversation. So we want to make sure that the client is getting what they want out of the conversation. And I guide that conversation. And I asked Scott what he wanted to walk away with. And he said a goal or an action step. And then we decided to start with food. And Scott made all the decisions. And then I guided him through that conversation. So I am leading the conversation, but it's completely focused on the client. And the decisions are made by the client in terms of where they want to go, how they want to spend the time in the session, what's an effective outcome for them. So it's a very subtle difference that you are, as the coach, somewhat in control, but it's the client who's determining the path that you take them down, if that makes sense.
Right, because I want to do all the things. I want to exercise. I want to eat better. And
Absolutely.
And when you were asking me, like, well, what do you think you'd like to really focus on? Then that helped me, because the food log was impactful to me, and I'm like, I really think if I can make some changes here, that'll help me feel like I'm on the right path.
Think about the experience if you've ever been to a medical practitioner or a doctor and they are in control and they are not hearing you, listening to you. They're just saying, okay, here's what's wrong with you. Here's the treatment plan. I'm going to call in this prescription. Any questions? And you feel like, well, and the doctor's out the door and you don't feel heard. You don't feel like you had the opportunity to say, well, I don't know about this prescription. I still have some questions. This is the exact opposite. It's why it is so effective. It is why we have medical practitioners wanting to learn the coach approach, because it's what we used to call bedside manner. It's where that individual is feeling heard, understood. They know that it's their voice. Ultimately, this is self-efficacy, feeling empowered. Scott's going to be empowered to really look at those Oreos and say, nah, I'll go with the dark chocolate.
Yeah, and Sandy, to that point, I've been told I need the Mediterranean diet by doctors for years. And I'm like, okay, got it. It's fish, right? And so that's like the only thing that has been in my head. We need to eat more fish. And I haven't done it. And so going in like this granular level, actually, I'm excited because I'm like, now I can see my path to having a more Mediterranean diet as opposed to just being told, yeah, go eat more Mediterranean. It's fish and stuff, you know?
Great, good question.
Do you typically talk about the difference between homemade snacks like roasted nuts and maybe granola and store-bought?
Well, it could enter the conversation in terms of educating a client as to what the ingredients are in many of the ultra-processed manufactured foods, even quote unquote healthy foods that Whole Foods sells, for example, and really getting them to understand, ingredients. And when you cook things at home, you have more control over those ingredients. And it depends on the time and the place. Like, I don't think Scott was ready to go down that rabbit hole today, but it might be something that we would address in further sessions along when he's feeling a little bit more motivation, maybe to look at that and cook his own foods and prepare his own foods and maybe study the cardiometabolic food plan a bit and say, are these foods that I'm buying, do they align with this food plan? And then we could have that conversation. So again, it would come from client curiosity and not so much direction from the coach, but it could be an educational opportunity as well if the client's eating a lot of sort of store-bought foods and helping them understand what they're getting in those foods when they want to make some changes to their lives and their health.
Yeah. There's another question here that I'm curious about, and I think maybe it connects to this. As a coach, how do you approach a client who is reluctant to find time to cook at home versus ordering out? And I'll be honest, this is, and I'm sure Holly in future sessions will talk about it. For me and my family, we are so busy. It is sometimes just like, oh, let's just order delivery, or let's just swing by and grab the food here because we don't have any time. We got screaming babies. I'm curious how you do approach that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real thing, right? That convenience factor of being able to get something quickly. And so it's really just exploring other options. I mean, maybe there's a better restaurant that you could pick up food from. Maybe there's a cleaner option out there in restaurants. And then maybe there are some tricks around food prep or getting things at the store, like a rotisserie chicken, which is quite easy to pick up at the store and steam some broccoli or have a salad, and you've got yourself a great meal without spending a lot of time. So there's a lot of workarounds that we can educate clients on. And also not to, be saying you shouldn't eat out all the time. Is just like respecting that that's their lifestyle. So how do we shift a bit, or maybe 2 or 3 days a week they can commit to cooking at home, and the rest of the time they're going to go out. It's these small, incremental, sustainable changes that have the most impact over time. And so acknowledging that many of us in this field, in this world, we love cooking at home. We love going to find the healthy foods. We make the time. It is so important to us, and making sure that we're not imposing our standards on everybody else and allowing them to come to their own conclusions.
I would like to add something, and this is absolutely a big issue. We had a few years ago a coaching in action. So in our core curriculum, we show coaching, and we had somebody who was an older woman. So and she was being coached, and we showed the process. And often people, I'm in my 70s, and many people I know eat every meal out. Why? Because they've been cooking for their family their whole life. They got rid of their pots and pans. They might be in small apartments now. They don't want to cook, and they enjoy the process of eating out. And so the coach accepts that person where they're at, but perhaps helps them to make some choices and menus. And often, even if you are ordering in, well, I used to do that when my kids were little. We'd order food, maybe it was a soup, and I'd throw in some dark leafy greens in the soup. So sometimes it can be a hybrid. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. And again, this is if that individual is interested in going down that route. And if not, you can still be supporting them to create better health. But it might not be the one you think is so important. And that's what we talk about so much at FMCA, and what's made coaching so, so powerful, where they do feel like this person isn't judging me, isn't telling me what to do. I'm in control.
And to underscore that, Sandy, like, I don't know if folks watching could tell, I have some shame around eating too much sugar and all of this, especially with my health background and wanting to do right by my family and be living. So there's a lot of load there. And, you know, Holly, credit to you, because I don't feel like there's any judgment about the Oreos or what have you. It's about, you know, making changes positively, but not like you're doing wrong. And I think sometimes I've had that experience with doctors where I felt like just a little bit of the like, nope, you need to cut out the sweets. And that just, it's not the most effective way, I think, for me to like make change, is to feel like guilty every time I open up the candy bag or whatever.
Sure. Absolutely.
We are about out of time, and gosh, there are so many amazing questions. I wish we could get to all of them. If any questions did come up, like about our program or anything like that, you can always email admissions@functionalmedicinecoaching.org. Yeah, I don't know if there was any closing thoughts, Sandy, Holly, that you had. I just wanted to thank you, Holly, so much. I'm really excited for these changes and where I'm going, because I mean, my why is right there. I'm so glad I could show the pics of my beautiful family, because I want to be there and I want to be active, and I don't want to follow the same path, you know, my father, my grandfather, etc. followed, and be healthier. So thank you.
I want
Well,
to acknowledge. Go ahead, Holly.
Oh, I just want to say thank you to you, Scott, for being just an incredibly authentic client and making this very real for me. And I hope our conversation actually continues and
Oh,
I
it
can
will.
support you through this.
I'm planning on it.
Well, I'd like to thank you too for this wonderful opportunity to throw back the curtain. And if you like this, if you have ideas for some other things you would like to see, if you'd like to see a continuation, please let us know. And for those of you who are current students or who are members of our alumni program, these are issues we commonly talk about during my office hours. So if you have a question here, that if you're one of those people, if you were not, if your question was not answered, I will do my best. If you are attending my office hours, we can continue the conversation there. But these are the things we talk about all the time in our core curriculum. So thank you all for being here. We really appreciate you.
Love it. Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.